Also, there's a real sense of wisdom associated with Kurosawa, that whenever Serena is lost in Los Angeles, she thinks of her grandmother and the things the grandmother said to guide her through.
Yes, and that was her loved one. So
yeah.
when she felt sad, she had nobody here to go to, so that's where she would go to.
Can you explain what The House of Six Doors is to people who haven't read the book?
Actually, can I read just this one paragraph? Please. And that will explain it. The house got its name because it had 6 doors, 3 on the ocean side and 3 on the bush side. The ocean side doors opened directly onto the center of the house. Here, there was a large living room, a dining room, and a kitchen. The bush side doors opened onto the gallery that ran the entire length of the house. Oma had said all plantation houses were built this way, to let the trade winds flow through them. When I asked her, why 6 doors? Why not 4 or 8? She told me each door had a purpose. The 3 outside oceanside doors were to bring in gratitude, wisdom, and compassion. And the 3 bushside doors were to let out greed, ignorance, and anger.
And it's interesting, the first thing that struck me when I read that was that could be pure Buddhism, couldn't it? The 3 poisons in Buddhism are greed, hatred, and anger, was it, or ignorance? And the wisdom and compassion are 2 of the great graces. But a lot of what she says sounds like Buddhism, but I think that's only because it's deep traditional wisdom of a kind you would find in many places. Yeah,
I think that's true. In the novel, she also has a friend that her best friend is from India, and then Oma was interested in all kinds of religions, and she was always looking for truth and looking for a way of connecting with that truth and finding a peaceful, more loving way of living. So I think Oma was a seeker, and that's...
and who'd found much more than most seekers do,
right,
and was able to impart it.
Yeah.
I think at one point she says something like, we can't give what we don't have, and we can't teach what we don't remember, something like that. And she's full of those things that just one sentence alone could guide a 13-year-old girl through all the travail in her life. And one of the other things that comes across very strongly, and I'm not spoiling it for those of you who haven't read the book yet, I don't think, is that that immigrants also, by their nature, have, I won't say double lives, but secret lives. And so when Serena gets involved with a young man, he's from another country too, and he seems extraordinarily kind and attentive and understanding, an ideal boyfriend, except he has this whole other life in his far-off country that she can't know about, just as she has Kurosawa that he doesn't know about. And so there's some sense that you're always waiting for the old life suddenly to emerge and throw everything.
Yes, which, for her, it does. And the other, the part that is, she's got her life in Curacao, he's got his life. They both have the immigrant experience. They're both lonely. They both want to connect. They find each other. But they have very different perspectives on life, and they're trying to find the places where they can connect and hook up and fall in love. And then she realizes that this whole other world, that they quite didn't connect, that there was this whole other world she didn't know about.
Yes.
And that's the immigrant story is, you think you've got it, and then you find out, oh, there's a part missing there. Or also the positive side of it is that you get a whole new angle on life. I mean, she got a view of life that was from a whole different perspective that she would have never even imagined. And being with the boyfriend, learned all kinds of things that she would have never seen before. So there is a two-sided. There's 2 sides to that.
Yes.
There's never knowing the whole story, but yet getting another perspective.
Yes, which brings us onto one of the central themes, obviously, in your life, but in the book, of language, too, and the way in which we become different people when we speak different languages, and you must have found that a lot in your life, I think.
I did, and one of the biggest things about being an immigrant and learning a new language and looking at the language, specifically looking at the language and feeling the language and really getting the sense of what what it means, because there's a sense of what it means, not just learning it from a book and translating it. That part really gave me the sense of the culture. It was in the language that I found the juice of the culture. For example, Spanish culture, it's very up to God. Everything is up to, the final word is not in our hands. It's, a greater being's hand. Where for the Dutch, everything, you've got to be completely responsible and everything has to be in our hands. I mean, you have to be, you're not going to leave any detail to God. You got to cover everything. So it's very different culture, and in the language, it's embedded. Yes. It's very much embedded in the language, and you can sense it.
I think you told me once that in Dutch, when you're speaking or writing Dutch, you're hesitant even about putting a capital letter on I, because in a Dutch context, that would seem to you're making I God.
Yes, I personally had the hardest time writing I, capital I, or starting a sentence with I, which you quite easily do in English. It's not bad, but I had to force myself, because in Dutch you absolutely don't do that. I mean, you don't capitalize your. Thinking of capitalizing your I is just sort of like, oh my God. And you don't start a sentence with I. Don't ever don't ever talk about yourself. We'll do that for you. So you're always waiting for somebody else to say something to you and or say something about you, but you don't start. Oh, I had a wonderful, And you always are tempered, you say the good and the bad, and you always have to be sort of balanced. You never say, oh, I had a great weekend. This was fantastic. You're just sort of like, well.
Well, like in England or New England, the highest compliment is could be worse.
That's right. And you get a real sense of what that culture is like and what, what the people are like when you hear that. You go, okay, got it,
And so you've spent all your life, and these characters too, trying to piece together or make a piece between these almost conflicting philosophies, what you just described.
And it's the integration of all the different options. And actually, I found that for me, it was holding all these different options and really valuing each one, not pushing any of them away or disqualifying them, but just sort of seeing them for what they were or what they are, and also for wanting, they are appropriate in some circumstances. They have validity. The cultural customs have validity, and especially in the context that they are in. So if your first reaction is, "Oh my God, that's not for me," I always sit with it and sort of wait and sort of be with it, and let's see what it really is about, because there is something deeper there.
And there's a great moment, as the book develops, there's a sense that Serena, with her mother, has always been a child when she's speaking Spanish or Dutch or the indigenous language. But it's only in English that she can claim her independence. She can become herself. She can literally find her voice in English, because that's a language where she doesn't have a past with her mother. And it allows her to do things she never... Is that right?
Yes, and it's exactly it. She doesn't have a past, and she is an adult in that language, and so she can express herself as an adult. And that transition for Serena, where it naturally would happen, and somebody that doesn't change cultures, would happen gradually. That transition would happen gradually. For Serena, it was abrupt, and it's in two different languages. It's two different cultures, two different languages.
So she could only really be a writer in English, one feels.
Yes. It would be a very different book for Serena if she was writing in a different language.
Yes. Even though I think it's somewhere in the book you describe English as the sound of cats fighting, and Spanish is beautiful. Yeah?
That's when Serena first comes to California, and that's what it's been. She can't understand the words, and she hasn't lived here and felt what the culture was about, and so it's just the sounds, and the sounds have that strange.
So among many other things, I mean, the book is her Declaration of Independence, so it's about her finding her own life free of grandmother and mother and environment. It's a very uplifting story in that, even though there's tragedy along the way. Did you find it, because of course these characters aren't you and your mother, but they have an overlap in terms of experience, and did you find it difficult to revisit those times? Because there's a lot of sadness and difficulty that you're describing.
There is a lot of sadness and difficulty, and what I did was I tapped into emotions that I felt, maybe not exact circumstances or situations, but emotions that I had felt growing up as a teenager. And teenage years are very tumultuous, they're very emotional, they're very deep, with a lot of pains and ups and downs. So I tapped into those emotions and then created story around that. And so yeah,
I mean, that's a great feat. I know you have one teenage son, but he's a son and not a daughter. And it's difficult to now go back to how one felt at 13. Did you have any tricks for doing that, or did you just take the imaginative leap?
I didn't start with story. I started with emotion. I started with a felt sense. So I wrote from a place of a certain emotion. I would feel, I would be in a feeling. And then I would write from that place of that feeling of, because the emotions keep coming back. Even when you're an adult, they're just not as intense and not as hopeless. Yes. But they keep coming back. So if I'd be feeling, a certain sense of loss or so on, I'd start writing, and then story would come about, and then I would, hook in with Serena and start writing from that point of view and have something happen to her. But I would check in with emotion.
Because it flows so naturally. I mean, did you spend a lot of time reorganizing it and making full starts?
They were, yes, I wrote it in pieces. And the pieces, they came with the emotions, and then I put them together as, and yes, we did some major rearranging. And
I never would have guessed that you'd done it. I mean, I do that, and I wish I didn't write like that. But it's very hard to get a real sense of momentum if you're writing. It's like shooting a movie out of sequence. You're writing the middle here, and then you're writing Act 2, and then you're writing Act 4, and then piecing them together, you still need a through line, don't you? And this has a very strong through line and emotional momentum carrying you along. I think pieces of it I had to write into it to make it all come together, but most of it was written as emotional. Yeah. And then there was also a part, one of my editors actually specifically talked about the emotional ups and downs. Yes. And so, and he specifically said, okay, we're having too much down here. We need something to bring us up again. So there is definitely a rhythm, like music, to have the emotions flow so that you don't get too deep into one and can't get stuck and can't get out.